Can the Cobra stretch fix your herniated disc at L5-S1? With herniated discs most commonly affecting this last segment of the lumbar spine, whether a severe herniation like this or a more minor disc bulge, the Cobra stretch is something that people often gravitate to. But is it going to be helpful, or is it one to avoid? If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael Fatika, the lead osteopath and spine specialist here at Back in Shape. We help people around the UK and all over the world fix their back pain from home and get back in shape for the long term. And unlike the forward bending activities of the child's pose or knee hugs, the Cobra stretch could potentially be something that could help you and make sense in the context of a herniated disc. Just as a frame of reference before we get into it, L5-S1 disc herniations make up around about 40 to 50% of the herniations that you guys are going to get in your lower back. And added together to the L4-5 disc herniations and bulges, these account in this last two sections of our lumbar spine for around about 90% of all of the disc injuries we're going to get. So while you may have injuries in other segments, these make up the lion's share of those suffering with lower back pain and sciatica as true root causes of the problem. Most of you guys struggling with herniated discs will have been prescribed exercises like knee hugs and child's pose, movements that fundamentally replicate the very injury that we did in the first place. Forward bending to touch our toes, put our sock on, or reach for something. And it's in this moment that we might have had that disc bulge or the more significant herniation. And it's important to recognize that it's not just the ligaments of the disc, the annulus fibrosus, that have been injured in this scenario, but the segment as a whole. There are many ligaments that run between these two bones, from one to the next, be it L4-5 or L5-S1. And these ligaments work with the disc to maintain stability to the segment. And they will have failed in some way, shape or form and become damaged as we go forwards into that injury, because we can't stress one individual structure without others being involved. That's not the way the body works. There are constant interplays from one muscular system to another, from certain ligaments to others. And remember, if you look at this segment here, we cannot make any movement to the disc that doesn't have some effect on the corresponding facet joints as well. And so all of the ligaments and structures that run between these two segments are going to be involved in that injury. Problem is, just like if you had a graze on your elbow and you wake up with it feeling like it's healed, if you fully bend and close that elbow joint, you stretch the scab, it starts bleeding again. And that's what those knee hugs and child's pose fundamentally are doing. They're doing maximal forward bending to pull open those tissues that are trying to restore stability. So it only makes sense that something like a Cobra or backward bend would be the right move. Now, it's important to recognize that a lot of people that actually start doing the Cobra will find that it feels good, but there are a significant number that equally find that immediately it is giving some level of aggravation. It might be reproducing those symptoms of sciatica down the leg, and hopefully this next bit is going to explain a little bit more about why that is, considering what we've already discussed about the injury at the segment. And obviously in this case, we're talking about L5-S1. But it's worth stating that's true for L4-5 and any other segment of the spine fundamentally. There are really three bits that we need to consider to help evaluate the Cobra more effectively. Number one is that there is a loss of tension of the stability that was present in the healthy joint. Understand that the disc and the ligaments, as we've discussed, play a role in creating a stiffness about this joint so that when the muscles or this interaction, because really there's three joints, there's the disc on the front interfacing one vertebral body to the next, and then there's a facet joint on each side. But there is a tension, a natural tension that should be there, that means that when we move and bend the spine, like those flexible lamps that we can get, everything moves in a nice unison manner in a correct way. There is a bending and pivoting, a twisting perhaps, that occurs through these segmental joints. When we've got the injury, this natural stability has been lost, and things can sometimes move in ways that we don't want them to. The second and obvious thing to consider is that there is going to be a little bit of disc in a space that it shouldn't be. Maybe it's a more minor disc bulge like this, maybe there is a more significant herniation. Either way, this disc is usually bulging or herniating into a space where the nerves come out at the side. Sometimes it'll be what's called a broad base bulge, which means it'll go all the way across the back, and it's encroaching on aspects of the canals, either the central spinal canal or the side ones where the nerves come out. This might be referred to as lateral recess stenosis or exit foraminal stenosis, etc. The final one, which is the one that is so often overlooked, is that quite frankly, we have an injury here. And just like any other injury in the body, if we've got even a minor sprain or strain to our wrist or ankle, it can often swell up. And this is a completely normal response to injury. But having a lot of inflammation driving to a space which is already going to be restricted in its space available because of that disc bulge that we just mentioned, or herniation, having congestion in these bits where the nerves come out can start to create more pressure. So to summarize, we have a lack of normal stability, the interaction between the L5 bone and the S1 bone. We have a bit of disc, either by way of a herniation or a bulge, occupying a space it shouldn't be outside of its normal healthy margins. And that is made worse by the presence of excess inflammation that is a normal natural part of the process, but creating even more congestion where those nerves are coming out. These are the things that we need to consider when we're doing the Cobra exercise. So if we take first the issue of the stability or the atypical movement that might occur as associated with an injury and a loss of the natural and normal tension between the L5 and S1 segment. As we go into the Cobra position, rather than these joints bending backwards nicely as they should do, because we don't have any fulcrum or any pivot, all we can do is just push up with our hands and hope that everything moves in a normal fashion. But what often happens in the case of these L5-S1 disc injuries in particular is that instead of bending backwards like so, they actually shear backwards, and it's not quite as gross a shear as that. But often we're going to find on MRIs from time to time with these sorts of injuries that there is something called a retrolisthesis. It is just that the vertebra, rather than being in alignment with one another as these two are, the L5 is just ever so slightly displaced backwards as the person is lying down. And this can be exploited or aggravated or irritated when you go up into that extension movement, because the vertebra won't bend backwards, instead it shears a little bit. The second issue is that as we bend backwards, if we take the little hole where the nerves come out here as having two parts, the first part is the top part, which is going to be from the bottom part of the L5 vertebra, and the second part is from the top of the S1 vertebra, and these make that hole that the nerve runs through. As we go from a neutral position into a backward bending position, those holes get smaller. They go like so. And so if there's already some extra disc material in there from the herniation, there's also extra congestion from the inflammation that's around that area, this immediate change in the size of that hole can increase the pressure and give you that immediate pain that you might be experiencing. And that's only going to be made a little bit worse if we've got any of that shearing that we just mentioned. These are really the two big reasons why the Cobra might be causing you pain. But there is an alternative that we can use that replicates this same kind of idea that we want to take pressure off the discs without the lack of control, the force, and moving into a significantly extended position that closes the holes. Because of some of these limitations, we really do prefer the towel stretch. And there's a couple of advantages to the towel stretch. This is where we're basically lying over a rolled up towel. Number one, we don't have a pivot point when we do that backward bend like the Cobra, whereas the towel is supporting a natural lordosis. What it is also doing is not pushing you into an extreme of extension. When we've got injury to those ligaments, like we mentioned earlier on, they don't move in a typical way often. And actually we need stability. And moving towards end of range extension, which inevitably the Cobra is going to be moving towards, is unwise. Instead, supporting the natural and neutral position works an awful lot better. And quite frankly, most people with long-standing and difficult to recover herniated discs at L5-S1 tend to be flattening out their spine. So in a perpetual position of flattened lumbar lordosis rather than the contrary. And so using just a gentle towel to support the natural position works a lot better. The additional benefit of the towel, unlike the Cobra, is you actually get an elongating effect. As we place the right size towel in the right spot of our lumbar spine, the spine bends over and gets an elongation as well as a little bit of restoration to the neutral in terms of backward bending, rather than extreme backward bending like so. It doesn't quite work the same in the extended position of the Cobra compared to the towel, which just has that little bit of decompression to it in a bit more of an even-handed way and gentle and controlled way compared to the Cobra. And for a visual demonstration of what that might look like, if we take, for example, the Cobra position and we do a backward bend, we might go like that, as opposed to the towel, we might go in a position that looks something like that. Much more subtle, more gentle, but it has the desired effect. We don't want to do anything too vicious or vigorous to this section of our lumbar spine, especially if we've got a more severe disc herniation. We typically recommend that the towel is done for anywhere from 20 seconds to around about 5 minutes. It doesn't really need to be done longer than that, and it can be done multiple times a day. And there is a routine, the full back pain relief routine, which is modeled on our phase 1 of the program. And there's a link down in the description which you can use to follow along with that. It's a nice, easy routine that includes this particular stretch as well as a couple of others demonstrated created so you can just hit play and follow along with it. So for many of you, doing the Cobra might actually feel nice. But even if that is the case, I think the towel offers a much better, more gentle and nuanced approach to move you towards the neutral. When we've got these injuries, moving in extended ranges in one way or another to the end of range is often not going to be advisable. And actually, I think there's a much better strategy for using the Cobra, which I'll discuss a little bit later at the end of the video. But know that whether you're doing the Cobra pain-free or whether you've switched over to doing the towel decompression, which I think is better in both scenarios, this is stretching. This is what we would classify as relief-based work. It's relieving the stress and strain on that herniated disc that is accumulating every single day from the things that we do. It also, by the way, is accumulating from our proper rehabilitative and strength-based exercises as well. So it's worthwhile doing at all phases in the recovery process. And one could really consider it as a back health exercise or practice, the towel in particular, to offset a lot of that sitting that we do every single day. But if you're just doing these kind of stretches, they go nowhere. They are not cumulative. You are not getting better at them, and they are not building resilience into your lumbar spine. And so you must be pairing this kind of stuff, relief-based stuff, with proper strengthening work, focusing on spine stability to build resilience back into these injured discs, to steadily develop good movement patterns that you can apply to daily life in the short term, and that you can use as a tool to steadily expose this spine to more load in a rehabilitative way to strengthen the very discs that we've herniated or injured. Ultimately, that's going to make you more competent at moving around the real world. It's also going to make you have a nice, safe avenue for building strength and resilience for the long term into your spine, the hips, the knees, the ankles, and all of the other muscles that contribute to movements like a whole body movement squat or hip hinge. Now, just to round this video off, one of the things that you might consider a sensible use of the Cobra, particularly if you're someone who actually struggles with it and finds it painful, is use it every so often as a test, as an evaluation tool. Can I do this? Can I bend backwards? Are my joints moving in a more appropriate manner? Is there less inflammation congesting that space? And testing this out once every fortnight, maybe once a month for a little period, or every week, as you've been making progress with your strengthening work and objective improvements in the execution of that work. So for example, you might have started doing some assisted squats, and then you've progressed onto doing some half rep squats, and then you've progressed onto doing some squats with a small weight, and maybe that weight has increased. And as you go through that process, periodically going, hey, I wonder if I'm still vulnerable in that Cobra position. And you just test it a couple times. And maybe it still hurts. Maybe it still hurts a little bit. Maybe it hurts less. Maybe it doesn't hurt anymore. And that's just great, useful information that actually you are really improving. And that other test actually shows that you can now move into that position, and maybe those ligaments and tendons around this area in the lower back are starting to allow that L5, rather than shearing, to actually move in a bit more of a normal fashion. Or maybe it is still shearing a little bit and it's still moving a little bit in an atypical manner, but there's so much less in the way of inflammation congesting that area that it's not causing you symptoms. Either way, take note, observe the improvement or lack thereof, and then continue on to focus on your strength building work, because that is ultimately what helps get your body better again. Hopefully you've got a better idea of the Cobra now, some of the critiques around it, and understand that actually there are other options that we can use that are going to be similar in part, but have some important nuanced differences. You also appreciate that stretches or relief-based practices themselves do not fix back pain, but they can be really helpful tools in relieving the stress and strain that builds up on your spine every single day, and that they must be paired with proper strengthening exercises. If you did find this video helpful, then consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing it with someone else that you know might benefit from it, and we'll see you in the next episode of the podcast.